When a young musician from the streets of Kampala first picked up a microphone, he was not dreaming of politics. Yet, many years later, that same artist, now known across Uganda as Bobi Wine, would become the unexpected face of a national push for change. His music turned into a message, his popularity into a movement, and his voice into a direct challenge to a president who has ruled Uganda for 4 decades. This is the Bobi Wine story. Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, the man the world now known as Bobi Wine, was born on 12 February 1982 in the village of Nkozi in central Uganda. Nkozi was a kind of place where life followed the rhythm of the land. Most families survived through small-scale farming. It was a simple but demanding way of life, and those early years shaped his sense of resilience and hard work. But his childhood took a sharp turn when his family moved to Kamwookya, a slum on the edge of Kampala. The crowded streets, the constant struggle for basic services, and the visible poverty created a completely different world. Bobi's parents had hoped the move to Kamwookya would bring better opportunities, but survival in this place came with its own set of challenges. Still, it was here that Bobi learned what it meant to live at the margins of a fast-growing city, and those lessons stayed with him. The young boy started school at Kanoni Primary before moving on to Kasaka Secondary School. But money was always tight. School fees were never guaranteed, but his parents held firm in their belief that education could open doors for their children. Their determination kept him moving forward. After secondary school, he earned a place at Makerere University, one of Africa's leading institutions. Bobi Wine studied music, dance, and drama, and this period changed him. Makerere exposed him to new ideas, new influences, and a wider view of the world. It was also here where his passion for music deepened and began to take shape. Drawing inspiration from reggae, hip-hop, dancehall, and local Ugandan styles, Bobi developed a sound that felt both fresh and also familiar. It was in 2001 where he released his debut single, Akagoma, which became an instant hit. Listeners connected not only to the rhythm, but to the everyday stories Bobi wove into his lyrics. As his career grew, Bobi became known as a voice for the urban poor. Many of his songs highlighted social issues and challenged listeners to think about their rights and the direction of Uganda. All of this earned him the moniker the Ghetto President, a title that would reflect how deeply he resonated with the marginalized communities of Uganda. It's worth noting that his musical journey was not always political. His catalog was full of upbeat dancehall tracks, love songs, and celebrations of success. At that stage, Bobi's music rarely confronted the tougher realities of corruption or even human rights. But well, Uganda was changing, and so was he. By the late 2010s, Bobi Wine had reinvented himself into a completely different arena. His smooth reggae love songs had given way to sharp, politically charged tracks that criticized Uganda's ruling establishment. This was indeed the beginning of a new chapter, one that would see him move beyond the world of entertainment and into the center of national politics. To understand the political world Bobi Wine stepped into, you have to look at the Uganda that has been shaped by President Yoweri Museveni and his national resistance movement. Uganda has been independent for more than 6 decades. And for 40 of those years, Museveni's NRM has ruled without interruption. It is one of the longest continuous governments on the continent. Yoweri Museveni took power in 1986 after leading an armed rebellion. He was only 41 at the time and spoke confidently about a new beginning for his country. Museveni promised stability, economic revival, and a break from Uganda's turbulent past. Bobi Wine was only 4 years old when this new era began. Also, when he entered office, the president criticized African leaders who held on to power for too long. For the first 10 years of Museveni's rule, Uganda had no multi-party elections. Instead, the country operated what he called the movement system. Political parties existed on paper but had no meaningful role. The first presidential election under this arrangement was held in 1996. Yoweri Museveni ran as the movement's candidate and won easily, taking around 75% of the vote. Multi-party politics only returned in 2005 after a national referendum. At the same time, Parliament, under strong pressure from the president, removed presidential term limits. That decision reshaped Uganda's political future. It allowed the president to remain in office far beyond what the original constitution had intended. Over time, further changes followed. In 2018, the age limit of 75 for presidential candidates was scrapped, allowing Museveni to run again. By then, Museveni had become one of Africa's longest-serving leaders. But it's not all doom and gloom. Museveni's supporters credit his government with major achievements. Uganda has seen long stretches of peace. Primary education expanded to reach millions of children. The country's road network also grew from roughly 1,900 kilometers to nearly 7,000. There was progress in women's participation in public life. Uganda's economy expanded, and the nation strengthened relationship with regional and even global partners. But as you can imagine, these successes sit alongside deep frustration. Allegations of corruption, as well as widespread poverty, high unemployment, and inequality remain persistent challenges. Critics of the government also point to the erosion of constitutional checks and balances. At the same time, when asked during the last election about stepping down, President Museveni responded with a metaphor that revealed how he saw his role. How, he said, could he leave a banana plantation that only had just begun to bear fruit? What an interesting take. This was the political landscape Bobi Wine walked into. By the mid-2010s, Bobi Wine was already a household name, not just as a musician, but as a cultural force. But the more he spoke through music, the more he felt its limits. By 2017, he reached a turning point. If he wanted real, lasting change, he would have to step directly into the political arena. Politics, risky as it was, offered a path to influence the system itself. So Bobi leaned on his strongest asset, his connection to the youth and the urban poor. They saw themselves in him, and his message was simple and empowering: people power, our power. Bobi's rallies were lively gatherings. They were full of energy and possibility, and he often repeated a line that captured the spirit of his campaign. If Parliament would not come to the ghetto, he said, then the ghetto would go to Parliament. On June 29, 2017, he contested the Kyadondo East by-election. The result stunned the establishment. Bobi won more than 75% of the vote. It was a landslide and a clear sign that the country's political mood was shifting. Many young Ugandans were hungry for change and willing to rally behind a new kind of leader. The victory also marked the rise of the People Power movement. It had become a serious political force in Uganda. Inside Parliament, Bobi quickly built a reputation as a principled critic of the government. He challenged key policies and refused to be intimidated. But as you can imagine, the state responded with pressure. The president himself began addressing Bobi Wine directly in newspaper columns, something he rarely did with other opponents. Tensions reached another level during the debate to remove the presidential age limit. Bobi was one of the most outspoken voices against this proposal. Despite the pushback, however, President Museveni eventually secured the amendment. But Bobi Wine's stance elevated his profile even further. During this period, Bobi crafted a sharper political identity: red outfits, red berets, and a bold focus on citizen power. The style drew inspiration from South Africa's economic freedom fighters, but the message was tailored to Uganda's own struggles. Slowly, the skepticism that once surrounded Bobi began to fade. In 2018, he formalized the growing movement by creating People Power, Our Power as a pressure group. When the government blocked its registration as a political party, Bobi shifted strategy. He joined a small existing party and rebranded it as the National Unity Platform, NUP. The move was a masterstroke. Within a short time, more than 20 MPs crossed over from established opposition parties to join his NUP. Bobi Wine's years in parliament were anything but quiet. From the moment he took his seat, he found himself clashing with the state. As I alluded to earlier, the state viewed his popularity with deep suspicion and moved quickly to limit his influence. For example, they blocked his concerts again and again. They even banned the public from wearing the red berets. Bobi Wine's arrest began almost as soon as his political career did. They became so frequent that Ugandans lost count. But not one charge ever resulted in a conviction. Many of his supporters faced an even harsher reality. Some were detained for long periods. Others lost their lives in circumstances that raised serious questions. One event in particular changed everything. In August 2018, Bobi Wine traveled to Arua in northwestern Uganda to campaign for an independent candidate. What happened next would become one of the darkest moments of his political journey. After reports surfaced that stones had been thrown at the president's motorcade, security forces swept in. Bobi Wine and more than 30 of his colleagues were arrested. That same night, his driver, Yasin Kauma, was shot dead. Bobi Wine has long believed the bullet was meant for him. In the aftermath, President Museveni offered a very different account. In several public statements, he accused Bobi Wine of stirring up the crowd. President Museveni insisted that the army had prevented greater violence. According to him, the security forces had acted responsibly. In the days that followed, Bobi Wine faced charges of treason and illegal possession of firearms. His time in custody was devastating. He later described beatings so severe that he could not sit, stand, or walk unaided. Through the next election period, arrests of opposition figures continued. The worst incident came after Bobi Wine was arrested again in November of that year. Protests broke out across Uganda, and within days, it is said that at least 54 people had been killed by security forces. It was one of the deadliest crackdowns Uganda had seen in years. By 2019, Bobi Wine was no longer seen as just a popular musician or a rising opposition member of parliament. He was actually now preparing for the biggest political leap of his life. That year, he announced that he would challenge the incumbent President Yoweri Museveni in the 2021 election. At that point, Museveni had already ruled Uganda for more than 30 years, and his message was simple: Uganda needed a new beginning. Instead of relying on state-aligned media, he used his massive social media presence to speak directly to the public. Facebook, X, and YouTube became his main tools, and his approach worked. His message spread across cities, towns, and remote villages. The campaign period became one of the most violent Uganda had witnessed in decades. In the end, the Electoral Commission announced that President Museveni had won with 58.6% of the vote. Bobi Wine and his NUP rejected the outcome. They argued the election was neither free nor fair and presented evidence of widespread intimidation and manipulation. So, as Uganda approaches the 2026 elections, the stage is set for a similar showdown. In one corner, you have President Museveni, the long-time incumbent, and in the other, Bobi Wine, his most vocal opponent. Both men are preparing to go head-to-head once more. Bobi Wine's message for these elections is familiar. He wants a new Uganda now. And this is the same call he rallied behind in 2021. And for many Ugandans, his message still resonates. Nearly 80% of Uganda's population is under 35, and this generation sees in Bobi Wine a chance for something different, a future that feels closer to their own struggles and ambitions. Yet Uganda's political divide also remains sharply generational. President Yoweri Museveni continues to draw support from older and rural communities, many of whom remember the chaos of past regimes. For them, a sudden change in leadership still feels risky. Even with his faults, They argue Museveni compares favorably to the turbulent years that came before him. His long rule has its critics, but it also has moments that some voters point to with cautious approval. So, as 15 January 2026 approaches, Uganda moves towards another decisive moment. And Bobi Wine says he's determined to stop President Museveni from extending his time in power to an unprecedented 45 years. Don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.
This one is also wholly made in Uganda. I would have come here in my jungle hut, which is totally Uganda made, but because there's no sunshine, I decided to use the beret. But this one is even better. This actually was designed by me.